have been talking about the behavioral chapter. We've talked about classical conditioning, and we have talked about operant conditioning. Now, we've also talked about continuous reinforcement. We've talked about partial or intermediate reinforcement. Today, we're going to talk about what the difference is between a reinforcer and a punisher. Okay, we talked about extinguished behavior, spontaneous recovery, and now we're going to talk about reinforcers. When we're talking about reinforcers and we're talking about punishers, both of them have classifications of either being positive or negative. Okay? Now, if you see a positive sign, if you have a 2 and a 2 and a positive sign, what do? You add, okay? If you have a 5 and a minus sign and a 2, what are you going to do? Subtract. So, the positive sign means you are going to add something or give something. The negative sign means you're going to take it away. Whether it's a reinforcer or a punisher, it's going to work. It's going to work for both of them like that. Now, I'll clarify it even a little bit more now. A reinforcer is a stimuli, an event, that is going to increase the frequency of behavior. It's going to cause the behavior to happen more often. It's going to increase the likelihood that behavior is going to happen again. Now, reinforcers never decrease frequency of behaviors. Now, you haven't heard me make too many absolute statements in this class, but I will say 3 absolute statements. Rocks are hard, water's wet, reinforcers never decrease frequency of behavior. Okay? Now, before we go any farther, we are going to start learning how to classify behaviors as reinforcers or punishers and positive or negative. Do not let your belief system, your sense of morality, interfere with classifying these in a psychological classification. All right, so you have reinforcers that increase frequency of behavior, increase the likelihood this thing is going to occur again. Now, a positive reinforcer is an event or stimuli that's going to follow a target behavior to increase the likelihood that behavior is going to occur again. So, if you came in here and at 10:50, I say everybody who is in their seat at 10:50 is going to get 25 extra points just for being on time. What's that going to do? It's going to increase the likelihood that students are going to be on time in their seat at 10:50. Okay? So I would be giving something, I'd be giving points to increase the likelihood of people being on time. If I want to teach a dog how to sit, I'll say sit, and I'll help that dog get in a sitting position, and then I'll give them a treat. And then I'll say sit, help them to get in that sitting position, and give them a treat. And I'll keep doing that until the dog sits on its own, and I'll still give it a treat. And I'll start giving it a treat every time for a little while, and then what am I going to do? Put them on a partial reinforcement schedule. But every time that I give them a treat when they sit, it's going to increase the likelihood they'll sit again when I tell them to. Okay? Life examples. I get in my car and I put the key in the ignition and I turn it. Why?
Start the car.
Do what?
Start the car.
And how do I know that? Because it has worked in the past. So I have learned if I put that key in the ignition and I turn it, I'm getting a positive reinforcement. The car is going to start. And so, therefore, that's a positive reinforcer. We've been washing our hands a lot lately. I go to the basin and I turn on the faucet. Water coming out is a positive reinforcer because now I know when I turn this faucet on, water is going to come out because I have been taught that is what it's going to do. That's going to work. And so, that's a positive reinforcer. I'm going to add something after the target behavior to increase the likelihood it's going to happen again. Okay. Well, then we have what's called a negative reinforcer. Now remember, we're going to keep trying to increase frequency of behavior. So now I'm going to take something away to increase the likelihood a behavior is going to occur again. All right? I get in my car. I turn on the ignition and I hear this horrible, some of the cars have bells, some of them have a buzzer, some of them have, it's an obnoxious sound until I click my shoulder strap. Now, the obnoxious sound, that bell, that buzzer, whatever it is, it's removed after the target behavior of me clicking that seatbelt. Why does it do it? To teach me that I need to buckle up before I'm going to be able to ride. Now, because this happens so often, when I get in before I start my car, I go ahead and buckle up because I know I've got to. So this is a negative reinforcer. It's got this obnoxious, aversive stimuli that I don't like, and it'll go away after I display the behavior that's the target of what we want. Now, you have this teenage girl. She comes from a very, very, very wealthy family. They are so wealthy, they have an incredible sound system piped in every room of the house. It is a magnificent sound system. Well, the teenager gets in trouble and she is grounded and cannot leave the house. She comes downstairs and her mom says, well, since you're having to be here anyway, I'd like you to clean your room. You know, the health department's about ready to condemn you. Yeah, I'll get around to it. Now, mom knows this teenager hates classical music. Detests it. It just goes all over her. So, mom puts on some classical music and pipes it all through the house. This teenager can't get away from it. She comes running and said, Mom, take that stuff off. I can't stand it. It is just driving me nuts. Get rid of it. And she said, I'll turn it off when you clean your room. So, the teenager goes up and makes a half attempt. Mom says, nope, this isn't clean. And the music stays on, so she goes back, she cleans the room beautifully. And Mom says, now that's great, and she turns off the music. See, when the target behavior happens, then the aversive stimuli is removed. So there's that minus sign. There's that negative. You're taking it away. With positive reinforcement, you're giving them something. Okay? Well, then we have another reminder. Reinforcers never, 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 ever decrease the frequency of behavior. Well, punishers are something used to decrease the frequency of behavior. So it's going to be opposite of the reinforcer. There are positive punishers and there are negative punishers. Punishers never, 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 never increase the frequency of a behavior. They always decrease frequency of behavior. Now, as I said, we have positive punishers and we have negative punishers. Positive punishers, you're going to give them something to decrease the frequency of behavior. Negative punishers, you're going to take something away to decrease the frequency of behavior. A positive punisher. You have a 16-year-old boy, he passes the driver's test. He comes up and says, Dad, I passed my driver's test. And he says, son, I'm really proud of you. Well, thanks, Dad. I kind of asked this girl to go out, and I'd like to make an impression on her, so to celebrate, can I use the car tonight? And he said, son, you know, you've done well. I'm proud of you. You can use the car as long as you get back by midnight. Oh, Dad, that's not a problem. I'll be here. At 2 o'clock, the son comes home. The next morning, Dad says, son, you promised me you'd be here at 12 o'clock. You came in at 2. I'm not happy. I'm going to make you clean the yard. You're going to rake the yard, get all the leaves up and everything. You're going to clean out the garage, and you're going to wash and wax the car, so that maybe next time you'll remember to be in when I tell you to. So he has given him chores. He has given him these extra chores to decrease the possibility that he'll come in late again. So he's giving him something, so that's going to be a positive punisher. Well, he comes in and he says, Dad, she said she'd go out with me again tonight. Go out with me. Can I use the car tonight? And he said, well, son, you know, last time I let you use the car, you promised me you'd be in at midnight, and you came in at 2. Do you think you can make it on time tonight? Oh, yes, sir, I sure can. I've learned my lesson. Okay, son, well, you can use the car. You can use a car. Son comes in at 2 o'clock. Next morning, Dad is not happy. He's mad. And he said, son, you promised me you'd be here at 12 o'clock. He came in again at 2. He said, oh, I'm sorry, Dad. I got to talking with some friends and stuff after my date. I lost track of the time. I said, son, that doesn't matter. You were supposed to be here at midnight. So I'm going to take away your car privileges for a month. Okay, Dad. So now he has taken something away. He's taken the privilege of driving the car away. So that's going to be a negative punisher. He is taking something away to decrease the likelihood that the son is going to come in late again. Okay? Month passes. Comes up, says, Dad, she said she'd go out with me again. Can I please use the car? Son, you've broken your word to me twice. Now, I am not pleased about you breaking your word to me. Will you be in at 12 o'clock tonight? Yes, sir. I will be in at 12 o'clock tonight. Okay, you can use the car. He comes in at 2 o'clock. This time, Dad meets him as soon as he comes to the door, grabs him by the shirt, and starts pounding him. And I mean, he beats him. And he beats him so badly that the kid has to go to the emergency room. Was that positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, or negative punishment?
Positive punishment.
Do what?
Positive punishment?
All right, we've got a positive punishment over here. Anybody got another idea? You want to say negative punishment, okay. Anybody else want to take a guess?
I would say positive reinforcement.
Positive reinforcement, okay. We're spreading it out. Are you going to say negative reinforcement just to make it easy?
Might as well.
Well, actually, you jumped on it first and you were right. Now what happened is, what the father did was not right. It was illegal. It was immoral. But it was a positive punisher because he gave him a beating. He gave him a beating to reduce the chance, to lessen the chance that he's going to break curfew again. So when you give him something, even if it's a beating, it's going to be a positive punisher. We're not saying it's a positive act. We're not saying it's a good act. But we are, if we're classifying it psychologically, it is a positive punisher. Now, when I went away to college, I kind of lost track of my best friend. You know, we kind of went our separate ways, and 3 or 4 years later, I was home for the weekend, and we ran into each other. And this was like, oh, this is great, you know. And so we sat there, we stood for a few minutes and exchanged a little bit of information about what was going on. And we decided to have lunch the next day. Well, she came by and picked me up, and in the back seat was her little boy. Her little boy, I guess he was about 4 years old, because it had been over 4 years since I had seen my friend. Well, after we got through with lunch, she was driving me back to my house, and she said, I've got to pick up a couple of things for supper tonight. I don't want to have to drive all the way back in town. Would you mind too terribly much if I stopped at the grocery store on the way to drop you off? And I said, no, I don't mind at all. Well, she stopped, she got out, and she said, if you don't mind, I'll leave Brant here. That was her son's name. I'll leave Brant here, and I can run right in, run right out. It won't take me 5 minutes. No problem, take your time. Little boy in the back seat. Yeah. She gets out, she starts going into the store, and he's watching her. As soon as she gets out of sight, he reaches from the back seat over that back seat, grabs a hunk of my skin, pinches me, and I said, please don't do that. I said, that hurt. And I said, don't do that. If you do it again, I'm going to pinch you back twice as hard. I leaned over, I grabbed some skin, and I pinched the fire out of that kid. Was that positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, or negative punishment?
Positive punishment.
Okay, we have a positive punishment over here. Anybody disagree? She's right again. I gave him a pinch to make him stop. I gave him a pinch to decrease the likelihood he's going to pinch me again. Just for the fun of it, the rest of that story, he looked at me and he said, ow, that hurt. I said, darn right it did. That little kid put his teeth on my forearm, and he looked at me defiantly, and I looked at him and I said, I bite 3 times as hard. And he goes, he and I have been best friends ever since. When he was a little older and we'd go skiing, I'd give him a little wedgie, and I'd pick him up, throw him out the boat. He'd get so mad, He's about 6'4" now, and when we go to the lake, I don't get anywhere near the boat with him. It's not profitable for me to think about doing that, okay? But anyway, you can see that by me following through with that pinch and saying, I told him I was going to pinch him twice as hard, and I followed through. I pinched him twice as hard, and then when he went to bite me, and I said, I bite 3 times as hard, he decided it wasn't worth his while to test me. So, that positive punisher worked. Okay? Again, if it's a positive punisher, you're giving something to decrease the likelihood behavior is going to occur again. If it's a negative punisher, you take something away to decrease the likelihood that a behavior is going to occur again. Well, we've only got a couple more terms to get through this chapter. Acquisition is actually basically the first stage of learning something. Okay, that's all it is. It's the initial stage in establishing a new behavior. Generalization. This is learning that's applied too broadly. It is opposite of discrimination, where learning is applied specific to that stimulus. All right, so I go to grab this cup, don't know that there's a yellow jacket on the back of it, and it stings me. Okay, I see it flying away. That really hurt. Now, that was a bug. That was a bug that flies. That was a bug that hurt me. So, logically, any bug that flies can hurt me. That's generalization. I'm applying what knowledge I've got too broadly. I eat at a restaurant. It's a fast food restaurant that is a national chain. I get deathly ill, food poisoning. Well, I'm never going to go to any restaurant in that chain again. That's discrimination. I mean, that's a generalization, because I have applied that this food poisoning came from all the restaurants, and I'm in danger if I eat at any restaurant in this chain. So that's generalization. You're applying your knowledge too broadly. Now, in discrimination, if I pick this up and a wasp stings me, I look at that and I say, that is a flying bug. It's got yellow stripes. It's a wasp. It hurt me, so I'm going to avoid yellow jackets. Okay? I've learned yellow jackets can sting me and hurt me. So I'm applying it specifically to what it was that that caused me pain. So I'm specifically applying it to that stimulus. I eat at a restaurant, food poisoning, it makes me sick. Well, I'm going to stay away from that restaurant. I'm not going to boycott every restaurant in the United States because they didn't all make me sick. This one made me sick, so I'm never going back to that specific restaurant. That's discrimination. Learned helplessness. This is where a subject is taught they can't do something when in fact they are capable of doing it. Okay? When we acquired Susie, that's one of our pets, her grandfather and grandmother was with us at that time, and they both were older and they couldn't jump up on the couch. So Susie watched every time they would come up, they would kind of whine, we would pick them up and put them on the couch. Susie started coming up and whining. Now, she was quite able to get on the couch. And not only that, we have a security system, we've got cameras all over the place, and we can monitor, and we've been out and looked in on the house and saw that she gets up and down anytime she wants. Chris bends over, picks her up, and puts her on the couch. And I said, sweetheart, don't do that. You know, she will start thinking she can't jump up on her own if you do that. Well, he kept it up and kept it up. Pretty soon, she wasn't able to jump up on the couch anymore. And I told him, I said, you know, it ain't gonna get any better. And he said, well, you know, I know that she can get on there. Why does she do this? I said, because you taught her to. Learned helplessness. And so he said, well, how do we break it? And I said, quit picking her up. Pretty soon, she'll figure out she can get on there, and she'll come up, and now she jumps up on the couch on her own. Now, one day, my mother was in the TV room, and she got up, went to the bathroom, and she stayed, and she stayed, and she stayed, and pretty soon I got worried. Went over to the bathroom, knocked, and said, Mama, are you all right? And she goes, yeah, I'm fine. And I said, well, why are you taking so long? She goes, I can't pull up my pants. I went in and I said, is there something wrong? Are you physically not able to pull it up, or what's going on? She goes, I don't know, I just can't pull up my pants. And I said, have you tried? And she goes, no. And I said, well, Mom, I tell you what, why don't you bend over and take one side of your pants and take the other side of your pants And when you stand up, pull them up. And she says, okay. And she did that, no problem. I called up her caregiver and I said, when my mother goes to the bathroom, what do you do? What's the procedure? And she goes, well, I walk with her to make sure she doesn't fall. She goes into the bathroom and she does her business, and I ask her if she's done and everything, and I help her pull her pants up, and then I walk her back to the TV room. And I said, why do you help her pull her pants up? And she goes, well, I just thought I'd make it easier for her. I said, don't do that. I said, you're teaching her to be helpless. And I want her to be as independent as possible for as long as possible. So she taught Mother she was not able to pull up her pants. Now, let's say a guy has a stroke. His team decides, his medical team at the hospital decides he's not making the progress that he should in the recovery, the rehab stage. So they said, look, we need to push him a little bit. So one of the things that they decided to do, instead of having the water right here, having it right here, so he's going to have to stretch a little bit and work a little bit to get that water to drink. And he's doing that well, and he's coming along a lot better. Well, his family come in, and they see him going, and they say, I can't believe how insensitive and how negligent those nurses are. Can you believe it? Here, let me hold that for you. We know you can't reach it. We know you can't pick it up. And they just taught him to be helpless. See, things that you are capable of doing, but you're taught you can't do. That's learned helplessness. Taste aversion learning. This is when you develop a taste or a dislike of a food because of a bad experience. When I was in the 6th grade, Campbell's Soup came out with a new product. It was a frozen, condensed potato soup. It was awesome. It was awesome. Loved that stuff. So Mother would keep it well stocked up into the freezer. The summer that I was in the 6th grade was one of those really, really hot summers. Triple digits, more times than not. I'd been out playing that day, and I got hungry, so I came in. Mother was out running errands, so I decided I was going to make myself something to eat. I looked in the refrigerator. There was bologna. I'm not a fan of bologna, so that wasn't going to work. Peanut butter and jelly just didn't seem to do it for me that day. But I didn't know exactly what I wanted. And so I opened up the freezer, and there were those cans of soup. And I thought, that's what I'm going to have. So I opened up the can, and I'm about ready to put it in the saucepan to heat it, and I thought, hot soup on a 100+ day? I don't think so. So now I'm looking at an opened can of soup that's frozen. I knew that Mother would not be happy if I put it back. What am I to do? And I thought, potato popsicles. I got me a spoon, and I started digging out that frozen potato soup and starting eating it. Didn't taste exactly right, but I thought that's probably because it was frozen, so I ate some more. After a couple of spoonfuls, there was a little white chunk in it, and I thought, not quite sure what that is. Maybe it's potato, maybe it's a flavor, not, capsule or something. I'll just eat some more. So I'm about halfway through this can of frozen soup when I see something green. Now I know nothing is supposed to be green in that potato soup. And I'm sitting there thinking, what is that? The first time I looked at the front of the can was after I saw the green object. And it said, oyster chowder. And my stomach was already starting to not feel real good. But I'm sitting there thinking, oyster chowder? I mean, this is supposed to be potato soup. And my stomach started rumbling, and I thought, I'll just go outside and see if that'll make me feel better. Not feeling good, going outside in 100+ degree weather is not the remedy. I wasn't out there too long at all before I started throwing up. Man, did I throw up. I threw up all afternoon, into the night, into the wee hours of the morning. That's one of those times that it was very vivid how sick I was. Well, you know something? That happened decades ago. I can't stand any form of oyster. I don't like fried oysters, baked oysters, raw oysters, oysters in salads, oysters in soups, oysters in chowders. I don't like oyster stuffing. I don't like any form of oysters. And in fact, as I'm talking about oysters, I'm getting a little bit of a crappy feeling right there in my throat. I have a taste aversion to oysters because of that experience. Okay? Observational learning. This is where you learn from watching somebody. You are learning from a modeled behavior. This happens all the time with kids. They're watching their parents. And I mean, I'm telling you right now, don't smoke. It's really a nasty habit. And it's so costly. You know, and it's nasty. And it's bad for your health. Well, I can guarantee you there's going to be a propensity toward smoking because they have seen their parents smoke. And that behavior is modeled. If a child grows up in a family where the father is beating the mother, he is learning that's the way a man should treat a woman. If a child is watching the father beat the mother, and it's a girl, her role is to take the beating. Because what we see in our family is norms. And you see that as a norm and you say, oh, well, this is the way it's supposed to be. And the cycle continues. Now, another example of observational learning, which is also called vicarious learning. When I got Gigi, that was Susie's grandmother, she was a little ball of fluff. A little bitty, she was a Bashan, a little bitty ball of fluff like that. And as she grew, she got where she could go up and down our steps pretty well. She's a smart dog. And so I thought, I'm going to get her a doggy door. And that way she can go in and out whenever she wants. Got a doggy door, got it installed. Took Gigi, showed her the doggy door, and I said, this is the way it works. And I took her and I pushed her through the door. And opened the door and went back and pushed her back through. That wasn't working. That wasn't the way. And so I got down on my hands and knees and I stuck my head through the door and I said, see, this is the way it works. I mean, you know, this is the way it works. She didn't like that. I tried all kinds of ways and finally I got basically a book, Doggy Doors for Idiots. And I learned how to teach a dog to go through a doggy door. When I used the right way, she learned very quickly. She was a pro going in and out of that door. Well, 6 months after I got Gigi, I got Susie's granddaddy, Josh. Little bitty puppy, little ball of fluff. He and Gigi were the best of buds. And they would play and romp all through that house, all through the house. One day, I see Gigi, and she's coming downstairs, and she's running, and Josh is right behind her. And she heads for that doggy door, and she hits that doggy door and goes through it, and he's right behind her, and he goes, "Where did she go? Where did she go?" Gigi comes back through the door and goes, "Arf!" and then goes through the door again. And he's kind of looking. "Arf!" He followed her out that door. Never again did he have any problems going in and out of that door, because she modeled how to use that door to him, and he learned from watching her. That's observational learning. Shaping, that's just learning step by step. Okay? After you learn something on this step, you take it a little farther, such as if you were teaching a dog to shake hands, first you have to teach him how to sit. And after you teach him how to sit, then you have to teach him to give him your paw, and you'll do the paw. Well, the first thing they have to learn is how to sit, and then they'll start shifting their weight a little bit to let you pick up that paw. And pretty soon, they'll take the weight completely off that paw. That's the next step, and pretty soon they'll hand you the paw. Every one of those successive approximations toward the ultimate behavior. Systematic desensitization. This was created by Joseph Wolpe, W-O-L-P-E. It is very commonly used by your behavioralists and your cognitive behavioralists. Now, it's particularly good for phobias and anxieties. What happens? Somebody comes in and they say, "Okay, I've got a phobia of flying." Okay, we can take care of that. First of all, you teach them relaxation techniques so that they can learn how to relax through this relaxation technique methods that you've gone over in therapy. And they get to be very good at learning how to relax. When they get proficient at it, then you come in and you say, "Now, to learn how to overcome this fear of flying, I need you to make a list of 10 things in succession about your fear of flying, going from the thing that you would fear least about flying to the thing that you would fear most about it." Well, she brings a list, the therapist looks at it, and the number one least anxiety provoking is hearing the word flying. Okay? So the therapist looks at that and they said, "You know, I'm going to say this word. And I want you to know you're in a safe place. Nothing's going to hurt you when I say this word. You are in control of the fear. Your fear is not in control of you. You are safe." And then the therapist goes, "Flying." And they go, and you say, "No, no, no. You're in control of your fear." And they work on it over and over again, and they're flying, flying. And then pretty soon, the therapist goes, "Flying." And they go, "Flying." So now you move to the next step. The next step might be a picture of a plane. And so now you show them the picture, and they go, and you say, "Now that's the way you used to do about the word flying," and you just ignore that now. You're just as safe right now as you are when you hear the word flying, when you see that picture. So they start working. Pretty soon, shows the picture, and they go. Then the next step might be showing them a model of a plane. And they work all the way up to the person buying a ticket and going and flying by themselves. Now, the step before that might be the therapist flying with them. But the last step would probably be flying by themselves, okay? They take it step by step, going up that hierarchy, overcoming the fear on each level until they gradually overcome the anxiety. The Watson and Rayner experiment, Little Albert experiment. I told you I don't like Watson. Watson was unethical. There's a lot of things that he was associated with that I'm not impressed with. He had a graduate student named Rayner, and they started working together, and they started working very closely together to the point that they started a relationship, and he dumped his wife and ended up marrying Rayner. They constructed this experiment called Little Albert. Now, Little Albert was about a 9-month-old baby boy. The experiment lasted at least 9 months. They wanted to know, can you teach a fear? Can a fear be learned? It wasn't known at that time whether it could be or not. So, they devised this experiment where kid was in a room, there wasn't very much in the room, and they started introducing things to him, like they had stuffed animals, they had different toys, they actually had a burning newspaper, they had all kinds of things. Kid did not show any fear. They brought in a rat, a laboratory rat. Don't worry, it wasn't a restaurant rat. They weren't going to let the kid get bitten by the rat, okay? They let the boy play with the rat, and he was happy as could be. Well, then, after he got accustomed to the rat, as he was playing, they had a big bar and a hammer, and while he was playing with the rat, they'd hit that bar and scare him. And he'd start crying. No, you don't comfort him at all. So he'd settle down, and he'd get interested in that rat again. And whenever he would move toward the rat, boom, they'd hit that bar and scare him. They kept this up over and over and over again until he became fearful of the rat. They said, this is incredible. He's scared of the rat. We've taught a fear. He's learned a fear. I wonder what would happen if we kept it up. So they kept it up. Every time he'd see the rat, and he'd start whimpering and wanting to get back. When he saw that rat, they'd hit that bar. And they kept it up and kept it up to the point that he was fearful of anything furry. He didn't like kittens, he didn't like rabbits, he didn't like fur coats, he didn't like men's beards. He was terrified of anything like that, which, by the way, is generalization. And that's another thing that they learned about was generalization. Well, Mom finally found out what was going on, and she pulled him out of the experiment. There's no documentation, there's no indication that they had any desire or intention to decondition Albert. He was never deconditioned from that experiment. Now, the bad news is, from what we can tell, apparently he died around 6 years of age with a condition called hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain. Don't think that the experiment caused him that, but do think this was a very unethical experiment. Do no harm, and they treat a kid like this. another reason I don't like Watson. Now, after he had his affair with Rayner, Rosalie Rayner, I believe was her name, the college found out about it, and things were a lot different back then. And when they found out about it, he was fired. He actually left the profession of psychology and ended up as a marketer for the ending part of his life. So, that's little Albert. Skinner, if you'll remember, we talked about B.F. Skinner. He learned about operant conditioning from a box, I think originally made for pigeons. And what would happen is they would have a stimulus, and if the pigeon would react to the stimulus by pecking the key, food would fall out into the chamber and they'd eat. So they learned that when you give a positive reinforcement, it speeds up learning behavior, okay? So that was the original chamber that he made, and then he made it a little bit more elaborate as he tested more and more about operant conditioning. But very, very interesting, what he did. With that said, the last thing in this chapter to talk about is just the definition of behavior modification, and that is using these principles that we have talked about to reduce or eliminate an undesirable behavior. Okay? Got it? Got 20 minutes. I might be able to give you some of the lecture for Unit 3. Like I said, this is going to be our last class, face-to-face. And I do have the lectures. They were not recorded as lecture during class, and I think I kind of talked in a monotonous voice when I made those, but you should have access to the lectures for Chapter 3 or Unit 3. Let me see if I can do this for this part. All right. Okay, this is the consciousness chapter. Because of time, I'm not going to go over the first part at all. We're going to talk about alcoholism. Okay? Alcoholism, the abuse and dependency has been around a long, long time. There is a common belief that a person's alcoholic because they do not have a strong willpower. Okay? Now, in 1955, the American Medical Association designated alcoholism as a primary disease. Now that's significant. A disease has symptoms, it has a course of progression, it has designated treatment, it has a prognosis, and a disease is not caused by a lack of willpower. Now, if we looked at diabetes, diabetes is a primary disease. We would not say they don't metabolize sugar because of a lack of willpower. We know that's a metabolic problem and it's part of the disease. Okay. So that brings us to the question. Is alcoholism caused by something in heredity or is it learned? In 1940, 2 doctors sought to prove it was learned. They actually went to Sweden. Sweden has an incredible documentation system where they can just about tell you every aspirin that you've taken in your life. Incredibly, very invasively documenting your medical history. Well, they went to Sweden and they researched 2 groups of kids, 2 groups of children. One group they wanted to identify were children who were born that their parents were alcoholics. The other group, children who were born whose parents were not alcoholics. Now, the monkey wrench in this is, for whatever reason, and they did not do this, they found these children who had already been fostered out. And they were just identified through the records. So they found children whose biological parents were alcoholics, but being raised in a non-alcoholic environment. And they found these children whose biological parents were non-alcoholics, but being raised in an alcoholic environment. Now, this is an incredibly brilliant experiment because it can truly teach, is this a disease that is connected to heredity or is it learned? Well, again, we have children whose biological parents were alcoholics. They grew up in a non-alcoholic foster family. Biological parents who were non-alcoholics who were raised by alcoholic parents. So if they were to learn this, this would be where we'd look. Because here you have the biological children and they have nothing but an alcoholic environment. So if they learned it, it would show up here. Here you have the biological parents and they're being raised in a non-alcoholic environment, so that would indicate, again, heredity versus learning. What they found was the children whose parents were biological parents that were non-alcoholics, that's the biological parents of alcoholics, where they were being raised, the children being raised in a non-alcoholic environment. Okay. The biological parents whose parents were alcoholics and being raised in a family of non-alcoholics had 4 times the rate of alcoholism than the general population. The children whose biological parents were non-alcoholics and being raised in a alcoholic environment had 4 times the rate. Wait a minute. non-alcoholic being raised by alcoholic parents had 0% alcoholism. Alcoholics, parents, and children raised in a non-alcoholic environment had 4 times the rate. Children whose parents were non-alcoholics being raised in an alcoholic had 0. This was significant. Well, in 1985, 1,000 people were interviewed by students at Yale. They were doing a research project, and they asked them, are one or both of your parents alcoholic? About 87% said yes. Across the country, 5 years later, UCLA replicated the study, and it was like 86.9 that said yes. So this correlates with the study that the 2 doctors did. Now, I had to take, in my doctoral studies, a drug class, and one of the things that I had to do was research whether or not this alcoholism is hereditary, and one of the things that I found, they have several groups now who thinks that they have identified 4 chromosomes that is connected to alcoholism and addiction. One of them is an inhibitor, and if that goes offline, that would make somebody much more likely to become an alcoholic. So, if you come from a family that has one parent that is an alcoholic or an addict, there is around an 85% risk factor for you. That does not mean you will definitely become an alcoholic or an addict, but it means that you're in a really high risk area, and it would do you well to think about that and to back off. If you have both parents that are alcoholics or drug addicts, you have in the 90 percentile. And so it's basically kind of like putting one bullet in a chamber, spinning the gun, and putting it to your head and say, do I feel lucky today? This is something that's very serious. They're finding more and more evidence it's not willpower or a lack of a willpower that causes problems. Well, there are 2 stages to becoming an addict or an alcoholic. I'll only have time to do one. This is your hypothalamus. It is the pleasure center of the brain. Now, the hypothalamus releases an endorphin, and endorphins, remember, they lessen pain. So, the hypothalamus releases an endorphin. An endorphin is nature's opiate. What does that mean? It means it's going to reduce pain, it's going to reduce tension, it is going to increase the mood. Now, this endorphin that is released is called tetrahydroisoquinoline. We call it THIQ. Again, it's nature's morphine, it's nature's opiates. Now, they have done experiments with rats. They put rats in a cage, drinks water, okay? Very happy, lap up that water, okay? They put the rats in a cage with alcohol. The rats stay away from it. They will just about kill themselves before they taste the alcohol, okay? So they know that it's not, that they don't want it, they don't like it. Well, they give the rats the THIQ. They put the rats in a cage with water and alcohol, and the rats start avoiding the water and drinking nothing but the alcohol. Very, very important, because that makes them have more propensity to take in the alcohol. This is what the brain releases. Now, normally it will not release that THIQ, but we have found that if a person has a genetic predisposition, we've got a little extra something here. So let's say you have a person that has no genetic predisposition and a person that has a genetic predisposition toward addiction, whether it's alcohol, whether it's whatever drug. You have these two people, they decide they're going to go get a drink after work. The one that has no genetic predisposition orders a vodka and tonic. Says, that sounds great, I think I'll do the exact same thing. So he orders a vodka and tonic, and the brain, the hypothalamus within the brain, releases THIQ. So this guy is going to say, okay, that was a good drink. This guy's going to say, now I feel better. And that sets up an attraction. Because he feels better, what is that? That's reinforcement. That's negative reinforcement. He's not feeling good. He takes this, he's feeling better. So what happens? It sets up an attraction where when he's feeling bad again, he's likely to go out and get some alcohol. So, well, they finish their drink, and this one says, well, I guess I better go. Oh, come on, one for the road. Well, all right, but that's it. So, in this system, he has another vodka, another tonic, this one has another vodka, another tonic, plus another hit of THIQ. That is the first step of addiction. Actually, I have the rest of this on tape, and if you're interested in seeing the rest of it, it's there for your education. I've got 3 minutes, and let me turn this off. Save some